good morning to you all and welcome to VPN here on 933 KFM. My name is Judith Atim, I'm your host, and today we are discussing national and state security issues. Well, my guests are none other than Brigadier General Felix Kuleje, the Director for Defense and Public Information. Good morning, Brigadier General.
Good morning, moderator, although my morning is not very good.
You're very smart, I must say.
Thank you.
Sorry, your morning is not good. What's the problem?
Yesterday we lost a general in a road carnage. This morning we have lost another one.
Oh, no.
In a road carnage.
Oh, no. Sorry. Dr. Livingston Sewanyana is my other guest. He's the founding executive director, the Foundation for Human Rights Initiative. Dr. Sewanyana, good morning and welcome.
Morning, KFM listeners.
Last but not least, Dr. Sarah Birete, executive director, Center for Constitutional Governance, and also the chairperson, East and Horn of Africa Election Observers Network. Good morning, Dr. Sarah, and welcome to the show.
Thank you, and good morning, listeners.
Let me start by saying we deeply commiserate with the UPDF fraternity general. This is quite tragic. Could you just talk about your colleagues briefly?
Yesterday we lost Brigadier General Frank Chambade. Frank Chambade retired early this year, and he was actually traveling to Mbarara is his home place, and I think around Mbizinya he crashed into another vehicle head-on. He was taken to Nkozi first, later on Nakasero, but by the time they reached Nakasero he had gone.
Yeah.
Now this morning I was just actually about to get here. They tell me police is talking of Brigadier Tunamasco. I was with this gentleman on Thursday. Thursday when we were burying the late Honorable Sarah Mateke. We sat together actually. We had breakfast together, we went for the funeral. He has also gone on the road.
Oh my goodness. That's a lot of loss. That's
two generals in a space of 20 hours.
Yeah, that's really tragic.
But that's how it is. The Bible says no circumstances give glory to God.
Well, but in this case, some of these things can be actually avoided. The state of our roads, the conditions, how people drive, the discipline, and so on. Some of this, this actually just highlights the everyday conversations Ugandans have about the state of our roads, the discipline on our roads, and so on. But
by and large, it's the discipline.
It's really, really sad to see lives that should still be, people who should still be living, going just like that in under circumstances that can purely be avoided. Terrible. Really. But may their souls rest in eternal peace. So, gentlemen and ladies, today we are looking at, we are discussing matters of national and state security. And when you look at what's happened in the week, of course, we had the Defense and Security Expo, which included honoring the late General Aronda Nyakairima, former Minister of Internal Affairs. There was a lecture by the President, His Excellency Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, Thanksgiving, and so on. And during the Thanksgiving for the late Aronda, the Defense and Security Expo, during that Thanksgiving Mass, the President accused the National Unity Platform of having stolen votes in the 2021 elections. 1 million votes, to be precise.
I hope that's not why I'm here.
No. I'm just talking about, just giving a background to our listeners. Just some of the issues that came up. He blamed this on the electronic ID registration system procured under the late Aronda Nyakairima when he was minister. And again, that's also the same week in which we lost the Defense State Minister Sarah Mateke, whom you've just been talking about. On the international scene, of course, the U.S. marked the 23rd anniversary of the September 11th terror attacks. And we've been also closely following events in South Sudan, where we've seen locals there and also the legislators in South Sudan accusing the UPDF of illegal encroachment and forced displacement of their citizens. And we just want to have our conversation today around these issues. But I'll first start by asking you, General, our concerns as a nation and as a state when it comes to political, social, and state security. What would you say about that? What are the issues that concern us most in those areas?
First of all, is the security of the person. Mm-hmm. Number one concern is security of person. Next to him or her is the property. Mm-hmm. Then two, we are talking about a stable environment. Because I can assure you, when the environment is not stable, even the human relations activities will not take place, because you are unstable in the mind and around yourself. Mm. So the body functions are also affected by an unstable environment. Mm. And then one should be safe enough to move and do his or her businesses. Mm. Three, we are talking about human relations within the community. So community security and ultimately national security. Mm. But a national security is an aggregation of individual security. Mm-hmm. Now, there is no death of the state. The reason why the state exists is to provide security to you, to her, to him, and I. Once the state loses that ability, it loses its reason to exist. Mm. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That also includes defending our territories and protecting and securing that.
I thought I was giving it without going directly.
Okay, no
but
problem.
From these unit security, of course, you're talking about territorial integrity. Mm. National security means that your territory is respected ensure and that does not come with mere smiles and clapping. It takes resources, takes human sacrifice to ensure that the state is secure, the territory is secure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let me come to you, Dr. Sewanyana, before we go into the depth of the security issues. Just your quick thoughts and reactions to just the events that I've mentioned that happened locally and globally, in terms of also what he's talking about, losing his colleagues in the road accidents. The U.S. commemorating 23 years after the September 11th attacks, and just generally your thoughts.
Yeah, thank you, Judy, and once again, good morning to our dear listeners on KFM. I think I will start by sending my condolences to my brother, but also to UPDF in general for losing such high caliber military officers. But that speaks volumes, as you rightly put it, that we need to seriously take into account the state of our roads and, of course, discipline. Mm-hmm. The subject that is before us today is very important, because here you're underscoring the question of safety and security of person. You're also looking at civil-military relations, and above all, you are looking at, general welfare, because once civilians are unhappy, then of course you have also a sense of insecurity. Speaking about developments not only within the region but globally, it underscores also the importance of ensuring that we are all vigilant in ensuring our safety. More so, speaking about the September 11, I think it caught the world unaware, but also it shows the extent to which we are under threat and the importance of collective efforts being made in harnessing not only our own security but collective security. That insecurity for one person is insecurity for all, and that's critical. But also in this, it underscores the importance of the individual being at the very center of ensuring safety and security for all.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sewanyana. Dr. Sarah, your thoughts about just what we've talked about. How would you respond to, first of all, the tragic news we're hearing from Brigadier General, and generally the issues of security locally and observance of the 23rd anniversary after the September 11th attacks in the U.S., before we come to the heart of our discussion this morning?
Well, the tragic news about the loss of generals in road carnage is very, saddening. And it's not just generals. The people we lose in road carnage every day as a country. On the up-country roads, majority of the up-country roads are still in a good condition. Some of them new, very new. People overspeed.
True.
And we don't take the safety measures of seat belts, of making sure the roads are in good condition, and that contributes to the rate of the accidents. In the city here, to move a distance where it would require 30 minutes, you need 2 hours. Roads are blocked, others are impassable, others we no longer keep left or right. You just have to move. Everybody's driving zigzag. As we were going around KFM, you needed like 30 minutes. Oh my God.
A whole detour every time we have to move around this area. Yes.
The city managers, I still need to send a message that we are very unhappy with your service. I don't even know if, especially after Chitezi, what the city managers are still doing in office. So we are living in that crisis. You can imagine the loss in Chitezi, 28 unaccounted for.
Yeah.
We can't even bury our dead. It's very unfortunate.
It is.
So some of these challenges are governance challenges, others are personal conduct, behavior, values. We need to all pull up our socks. On the issue of national security, basically it's about the welfare of citizens and the territorial integrity. After safeguarding the borders, and the making sure that our territorial integrity is not under threat, what happens to the human security within the country? And that includes the road carnage we are talking about, because human security is not just the work of security officers. The work of security officers takes a bigger chunk as pillars of the state to guarantee security of citizens with their property. But then what happens to the health, the education, the social welfare of the people, the road carnage we are talking about, the state of roads? How do you guarantee that indeed citizens are safe, but not only safe, but also productive? And that includes also food security. So once you don't guarantee safety of citizens and their productivity, then you are having challenges of state security, of national security. Going beyond borders, the 23rd anniversary of the 9/11 attacks, the world was never the same after those attacks. The international safety and security, the travels have never been the same.
Yeah, that's true.
You can't carry this, you can't. Life changed. Body scans, life.
You were in Washington 2 weeks ago. What is it like right now? Because the last time I was there was 2016, and everyone would tell you, well, things change just after the bombings, after September 11th. The level of security, the checking, and it's just too much. I don't know what it is like now.
No, Washington being an administrative state, there isn't much. Of course, it is safe, secure, but the checks are not that much because they are guaranteed at a bigger level.
Yeah.
So it doesn't come to like hours, body check this, park here, park there. No, it is guaranteed secured at a bigger level. And by the time you're in Washington, it's assumed you're largely safe.
Yeah, because you've gone through all the checks.
Yeah. So, but I saw, Kuraji wanted to say something.
Yeah, but the checks come before you arrive in Washington.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's what I
If you're going
said.
through Europe,
Yeah.
you are definitely subjected to a different set of checks
It's
compared to other travelers.
before entry, it is strict. So by the time you arrive there, they assume you are 80% safe.
Yeah.
So but to check in, like there's a time I was going to Washington and I had an airport hotel. Within the airport, to come back to check to board, I was shocked. I was like, am I a terrorist? And I said I will never do it because I don't like that kind of. So before you board for Washington, they ensure you are 80% safe.
Yeah.
There are some gaps that usually the technical people know you can't, but 80% they are sure you are safe.
But you see, Madam Moderator, those inconveniences will go through. You as an individual going through it, you are very inconvenienced.
Yeah.
But the ones doing it are doing it for a bigger picture.
Yeah, for the good of everybody.
Everybody else.
Yeah.
So you rather have this
Inconvenience,
which is temporary,
Yes, and
than being inconvenienced by say, a bomb which has exploded
You don't want to
and
go
has
through that.
killed people. You are displaced. You know that kind of thing.
true, very true.
Yes.
Very true. I always get upset when I'm going to some of our places, shopping malls and hotels.
And there's so much laxity.
And security looks at you, you are with your children, they assume you're safe. And they don't check.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Sometimes I
always
also ask
get
them, like,
so
are you going to
disappointed.
check me? And they're like, no, just go. And they just wave you. No one has bothered to even see you what's in your bag.
Yeah.
And it's risky.
They look at you, you look okay. You look.
Yeah, but sometimes
They assume you're safe.
You need also to be cautious that security is not just about physical security.
Yes.
There is also intelligence.
Yeah.
And there is also digital surveillance, which they do.
Yeah.
For example, if you go to Switzerland, no one is going to check you.
Yeah.
No one will check you in Geneva.
Yeah.
No, because they have
Systems.
Yeah, systems are in place.
high-tech surveillance.
Yeah.
So they already know how you
How you are and how you are moving.
Let me tell you.
Gentlemen, my producer is telling me it's time for us to take a break, and then this is actually very interesting. Let's take a break, and then we come back and actually continue with this. Welcome back. Welcome back from the break. You're still tuned to VPN here on 933 KFM. Before we went into the break, we were still talking about, the state of security generally, and my guests were sharing experiences about the experiences they've had in other parts of the world. But General, I know you're leaving shortly. You're leaving shortly. So I want us to go straight away to the South Sudan issue. We've been following the news from that side. Reports that there's growing unease about the presence of the UPDF in South Sudan, and these issues have been talked about if you follow the press in South Sudan from August and even early this month. So in August, legislators in South Sudan called for an urgent solution to what they've called the encroachment of the UPDF. They're accusing the UPDF of actually entering Sudan territories and violating the rights of citizens there, flogging citizens, and in territories, especially in eastern equatorial and central equatorial states. So the question is, from your point of view, what exactly is happening? What is the UPDF present in Sudan, and what are they doing?
No, it's not in South Sudan.
Mm-hmm.
And it's good you brought this so that the citizens can get to know the historical background to these allegations.
Mm-hmm.
When Amin was losing power, the Uganda army soldiers who were fleeing shifted the border posts, both in Acholi region and West Nile, 10 kilometers southwards. Intention was to make the Tanzanian soldiers think they had come to the end of Uganda and don't pursue them further. The subsequent government did not bother to correct that error. even us, when we came in, and for us the reason was different. These borders are not our creation. These are the same people. If you go to South Sudan, you hear of Owinji Bull. That's an actual name. You hear of Parajok. It's an actual name. So the people in Lamu and the people in Eastern Equatoria are the same people. And so we didn't bother about this difference over the border, although we discovered this was an issue. However, with the increasing indiscipline of both non-government agents in that region, the criminal elements coming in Lamu to steal cows, especially stealing cows, we are forced to deploy soldiers now in the territory we know is Uganda. All right? Now, because people have been used to this wrong position of the so-called border, they now accuse us of being in South Sudan. Of course, as you may wish to know, all of you, our philosophy, we would be the last to encroach on anybody's territory.
Okay.
Because, like, in fact, the other day, General Tafire, in the Arunda Memorial, gave it very succinctly. He said, what if they had put Uganda's southern border to Ngomoromo? Ngomoromo is on the border with Sudan. What would you be? Wouldn't you be Tanzanians? If the colonialists had put the eastern border in Mpondwe, wouldn't you be Kenyans? So the point is that the border we are proud of as Ugandans was not our creation. Rather, why don't we emphasize the oneness of Africans, whether they are astride the border or not? So to answer your question, we are not in Sudan. Where we are is Ugandan territory, and we have been forced to deploy because of the indiscipline of elements that are non-governmental, but they are armed. At times, even some of the government soldiers meander into the Uganda and steal cattle. We didn't even have deployments after LRA had been defeated. There were no deployments along our border. So what happened? We had to deploy because of these criminal elements. Now, when I saw this MP saying it, I realized he doesn't even know where his territory stops. And I can't blame him. The situation in South Sudan, if anybody wishes Africa very well, you cannot take a position blaming anyone inside that country. There are a lot of things to be done, and that's why before we came on air, you are talking of elections in South Sudan, and I was asking you, are you serious to talk about elections? Who to elect who? Along which manifesto?
They don't even have their constitution.
They don't even have a constitution. So we are not in South Sudan, but they have been disturbing our people along the borders, not only in Eastern Equatoria. Moyo. Our people in Moyo live in instability. Why? These fellows cross the border and they do the same things. And they are crossing from where? From what was acquired, or rather taken away from us by the fleeing Uganda army soldiers. Now, you can't take a wrong thing to have been done to be the norm. The last thing UPDF will ever do is encroaching on everybody's territory. Yeah.
So what about reports of human rights violations in those areas?
But why would we? Why would we?
Because there are villagers who are actually complaining that, look, the UPDF came and they had... I'm actually seeing a photo here. It doesn't show, of course, people being beaten, but I see UPDF in men in UPDF uniform with a group of people seated. I can't tell what...
when you are talking to people when they are seated, is that violation of human rights?
No, but there are other reports when you read the South Sudan press that people are actually being beaten up, bundled up in maybe vehicles and sent off villages and so on. I don't know if you've heard of these reports.
The person reporting, does he know the place? There are no roads in those places. So how would you take vehicles in a jungle?
No, so if there are no let's say maybe the report was inaccurate about vehicles, but about people being poorly handled.
In short, everything about that report is totally ignorant of the situation on the ground. We have no reason to mistreat or mishandle people we found on the ground. And like I've told you, for us, those are not Sudanese. They are Africans. They are Cholis. Our generals, we know who are Cholis, Otema, Ojiki. These are their people. Do you remember that at some point, our Minister of disaster, Honorable Hillary Onek, was actually being called a Sudanese, because these are his people. So for us, whether you call yourself Sudanese or Ugandan, you are our people, and we have no reason to mishandle anyone. But if somebody commits a crime and there is no police in this area, certainly they will be apprehended and handed over to the nearest police we have, which is in Lamu. We have no reason.
So are you, I assume you're in touch with your South Sudanese counterparts in the military?
We even have a general in Juba.
So what are the conversations that you're having with them? Are they okay? Do they understand that what the UPDF is doing in South Sudan is not an incursion or an encroachment the way the politicians there are actually framing it?
Let me, even based on your own information, have you seen any complaint from SPLA? Actually, now it is SSDB, SSDP, South Sudan Defense, South Sudan People's Defense Forces. Yes. Have you had any complaint from them? It's politicians, it's the media.
But then the concern, of course, people would have is that doesn't this portend for, say, a backlash or attacks on Ugandans? We've seen this happen in the past. If politicians are actually, say, fanning these flames of aggression and pushing the narrative that actually there's an incursion and Uganda is undermining their sovereignty and so on. Because I see some groups, actually, in some groups, I see some comments that people are actually posting.
I want to give you an example. 3 months ago, there was a claim in some paper from South Sudan of UPDF guarding His Excellency Salva Kiir's farm. Did you come across it?
I missed that.
Yeah. But
and that was false.
Of course it was. Now, this is in the same line. You know, when you have an unstable situation, it's like even in a home. When a home is unstable, a lot of things will come out of that home. More especially, rumor mongering. If there's no transparency in information flow, rumor mongering will come about. But number two, the absence of clear state institutions in certain areas of territories will definitely generate fear and at times rumor mongering. But most importantly, and this is what has been some of us our contention, politicians should be the last people to make comments on security in the areas unless they are sure. One time there's an MP who made allegations here in Parliament that Karamajongs were stealing cows in his constituency, people are not sleeping, and what have you. And later on, that's why I carry this magazine for you people to see. He instructed me immediately, go and drive along Karamoja border up to the Sudan border and get back. One of the last points bordering Karamoja, the gentleman had last been there 3 years earlier.
The politician.
So when I came, I exposed him, and he went running to my minister. Why is Kulaiji destroying me politically? I said, no, you started it. Mao Zedong then said, no information, no right to talk, unless you have done proper investigation. So this is not true, but we have deployments in our territory that some people, unfortunately, because it's taken over 40 years, think this is South Sudan territory. But after all, these are our brothers, these are our sisters. The authorities in South Sudan are our allies. Everybody knows this very well. So we would have no reason to actually commit any crime against an individual, because these are our people and we treasure them. They could treasure Ugandans.
Okay. So let me move on to the others. Doctor, I think we've heard, of course, what General is saying, but the concerns about rights issues, I don't know if you could actually speak to that in situations of tension, fear, hostility, and so on, and what this means for, say, other citizens who might actually be caught up in this whole confusion that they probably don't even understand so well.
I think, speaking about South Sudan, I think it is a case, or call it a story, of unfulfilled promises. If you recall, for a long, long time, it was expected that when South Sudan receives independence, from the general Sudan as we knew it. People would now, have their rights respected. They would have peace. There would be dignity for the individual, and that really did not actually materialize. Ever since South Sudan got independence, it is a story of wars, conflict, and abuse, and of course everyone knows that the territory becomes uncharted. It's a very uncharted territory, and as such, there are so many players in that area, and increasingly people are suffering. If you just go a few kilometers from here, maybe even meters, you'll find there are so many South Sudanese people now here in Kabalagala and Kansanga. They have all fled their country, and one wonders why. It's because there is lack of peace and security in that area. But of course, on a larger scale, look at the region as such. If you look at DRC, if you look at Central African Republic, you'll find there are so many forces meddling in that territory. And why? Because they cannot effectively govern. I think the challenge we have here is in South Sudan and even in DRC and the country, Central African Republic. According to the reports, I used to be privy to the reports of the UN missions in those countries. It was always very clear that there is no effective leadership, there's no effective governance. And when there's no effective governance, of course, neighbors become, victims. You recall that even our business people have been, unfairly treated, because some of their buses would be hit, their merchandise would be destroyed, and they would not be compensated. So that speaks about this region. Once governance is at stake, leadership is at stake, then definitely the result is abuses. And really, if you really speak about South Sudan, so many people have perished. There are so many warlords. But unfortunately, it has also spread to the bigger Sudan. When Bashir was overthrown, you have seen the conflict that has arisen. UN has actually deployed a mission in the greater Sudan to tame the situation, but the situation remains out of control. Although it has somehow got out of the global news, the problem still persists.
I was actually watching the news yesterday on BBC, and just a few days ago, I think there are allegations against the Rapid Support Forces who actually went and raided 4 villages, and in each household they killed 1 to 4 people.
Exactly.
So, and there were witnesses, there were people who survived, and they were sharing all the ordeals they went through during that attack. So it might not be dominating mainstream news globally, but it's still a very, very delicate and tense situation.
It's very fragile. Yeah. It's very fragile.
I don't think you're timing it correctly. You're being conservative with your words.
Well,
the situation in the Sudan is actually horrific.
It is.
What they are calling them the rapid something force. They are simply continuing the human rights violations they did in the early 2000s, if you recall. The issues of Darfur.
The Darfur region.
Yes. The human rights violations, actually it was massacres. They have just continued the same. Now they have instead more power than they had before. And the difference at that time, they were pursuing al-Bashir's interests or agenda. And in the process, he built them.
And now
they have.
They are untamed. You cannot.
Their leader is a billionaire, multi-billionaire in dollars. So even if no one gave him arms, he has a capacity to acquire them. And that's why you don't see any settlement in the near future. Because if you talk to people from that area, some are actually here now.
Yeah, a lot of them.
Yes, they tell you some of these countries that are volunteering to mediate are actually behind the rapid support force. They have a stake. You see, when you have natural resources, every shark and the jackal will come around. The Sudan has oil. The Sudan has gold, just like South Sudan does. You do not expect stability unless the people themselves have got angry enough to say, whatever it we have, let's marshal it for our own defense. And why isn't it getting attention? It's because the people who are benefiting are the people who control the international media. And the issue now is the Middle East, the mission is Ukraine. Africa, you are not even in third place. So you either care about yourselves or you're going to perish. And when Dr. Sewanyana is talking about the UN, you know UN has been in that region for many, many years. I remember officers who were part of military observers in Darfur. But did the situation change? Central Africa I've talked about. There is a UN force, there is an EU force, there is a French force, independent of the others, but still Central Africa is ungovernable. So it's high time we did look internally to evolve our own solutions. But expecting others to be the ones to deliver peace for you,
it's a dream. Let me move to you, Dr. Sarah. Still about the issue of securing South Sudan. And Dr. Sewanyana was talking about the governance challenges, the question of governance in South Sudan, and perhaps why South Sudan is what it is. Could you just share with me your insights? I know they've postponed elections to 2026, and I want us to talk about that later. But just if you could just talk about the governance issues as well that actually put South Sudan in such a precarious situation.
Well, South Sudan is the youngest country in Africa and in the world after attaining independence on 9th July 2021.
2011.
2011. So you have the turbulence. I think the leadership of South Sudan has never recovered from the death of John Garang. They were unprepared to lead beyond John Garang. And that's the chaos you see. Because if you look at the peace pact that was supposed, they should have gone for their first elections in 2018. They've been extending for 2 years, and I think this is the fourth extension of elections. Their army, because the army is a strong pillar of the state, their army still wears party colors of the different factions. You have the faction of Riek Machar, the faction of whoever. They still wear party colors. So they don't have an army. And once you don't have a national army, then how do you hold the nation together? You have issues of personal security. We have had issues of Ugandans, how they've been mistreated in South Sudan. When we are hosting so many residents of South Sudan here, including expatriates, people working in South Sudan stay in Uganda. They just go to the field and fly to the field and come back here. I am glad that there were no repercussions. Ugandans never fought back when our traders and everybody else were being mistreated in South Sudan. We have the other crisis of plunder of minerals and timber. And there is a resource curse in South Sudan, the same resource curse in DRC. And that's why when you talk of the beneficiaries, who benefits from a chaotic South Sudan, and maybe we need to document that. Who is benefiting from a chaotic South Sudan in terms of plunder of their resources, including the factionaries in government that benefit from plunder. They don't also want an organized government system where you have proper and sustainable exploitation of natural resources. So this is the heart of the chaos. And we need to go deeper into the political economy of South Sudan. But also the quality of leadership, in my view. I wish the people who have presided over the transition could agree to all keep away from elections and South Sudan gets a new leadership. But that's something for the South Sudanese to decide. It's a mere wish.
Personally, ladies and gentlemen, dear listeners, I am not enthusiastic about rushing for elections in a conflict-prone country.
So what do you propose?
It's pretense.
The situation just has to.
You see,
it has to evolve, and they learn.
Yeah,
through,
thank you. You're using the right word.
They just learn through.
You
the
need
process.
everybody on board, and elections are a divisive instrument. You remember how we started here with the movement system? A bus, an omnibus that you have every thought on board to heal first of all the wounds of conflict. You cannot come from conflict, then you dive into another divisive venture of elections. Because, I have said it before, and Honorable Sarah, you remember, Dr. Sarah, the moment you have political parties not based on class interests, the next tool to use to galvanize support will be tribe, will be religion. And tell me in Africa, which class dominates? It's the peasants.
Yeah.
And the peasants don't have a political party. Somebody here pretended that he was a leading peasants party. But next I was seeing him hobnobbing with the other forces. I will not mention them. The point I'm making is that the fact that Africa does not have an elite that is even 5%, you can't talk of multi-party elections. Talk of an individual. Come together with your thoughts, build a country, first and foremost, to heal the wounds, build a consensus on how you want to develop and to be governed. I remember we had a conference in Munyonyo in 2020. It was sponsored by the British High Commission. And they were talking about those elections in South Sudan. And everybody else was quiet. They were talking of agenda and what have you. Then I said, excuse me, who is going to elect who? Because here you're only looking at His Excellency Salva Kiir and Dr. Riek Machar. But are they the only political actors in South Sudan? The answer is no. Number two, what makes them different in terms of ideology? Three, have you bothered to know what the people think? People in Yambio, people in Yei, people in Bor, have you bothered to ask them? But you are focusing on the political actors that you know. And I want to tell you that one of Africa's tragedies is being governed from outside. You think you have your leaders here, but the people who are calling the shots, the people who are determining which road you should take, the road map, are from elsewhere.
So I'll come back to you later, General. Let me hear from Dr. Sewanyana and Dr. Sarah. General talks about, he gave the example of the movement party system, which he says it's an omnibus that gathers everyone, all thoughts and ideas.
Movement party is not what I'm talking about.
Which one?
The movement party is now.
Which one? The
I'm
movement
talking about the NRM movement of 1986.
So about
which had the Adokonechonis, they had the Semogere.
So something interesting that you said about healing the wounds of conflict.
Yes.
And I want us to talk about that a little bit. Have these wounds healed though? I just want to just let me hear from them. Then I come back to you.
You're the boss.
Hear what you
You're the boss.
Do you think these wounds have healed?
I think I would say no. I think it's still a long-held dream that they will ever heal. First of all, speaking about elections in Africa, I think generally it's call it a facade. Elections in Africa are a facade. You have countries or you have elections under what is called multi-party democracy, without political parties with an ideology. So it is all about individual interests. And as such, when people say we are going for elections, sometimes I question whether elections add value. Because what's the basis? When you hold elections, the whole essence is that you have a program that delivers you from point A to point B. But the status quo remains. it is always those who are privileged, who remain privileged, and they continue to plunder. And that cuts across. Actually, if you go back to countries like South Africa, after 1994, when Nelson Mandela was elected, the hopes of South Africans, the ANC, were so high. But after Mandela left the seat, all the subsequent leaders have added no value. So increasingly, unlike elections in Europe, which are based on particular, what he calls class interests, but broader interests, here it is all about promoting individuals and groups of individuals who exploit others under the pretext of providing leadership. No wonder when you look at health, education, infrastructure development in many parts of Africa, we're on a downward trend, and that I speak with authority. So increasingly, elections are not adding any value. They are not inclusive. They are not fair. Which country would you say has had really fair elections in Africa? Would you say, okay, Senegal maybe? I don't know.
Senegal is already having issues. I think the president has already disbanded the parliament.
So which country are you going to talk about?
Yeah, he did. Disbanded
the parliament.
They are having elections, I think, in November or December. So.
Hallelujah.
The youngest president, right?
Yeah. So it's about cliques, it's about tribalism, it's nepotism, gaps growing between the rich and the poor, the poor becoming poorer, the rich becoming richer. It's really a lost opportunity, and maybe we need to go back to the drawing board. So let's not be proud that in Uganda we're going to have elections in 2026, or South Sudan has not had elections, continues to postpone them. The truth is no value addition.
But I'll come to Sarah, but I would like to come back to you later on what would then be the alternative if elections do not hold value. But Sarah, let's first talk about healing the wounds of conflict. Do you think we've healed? And
let me start with South Sudan. The pact for peace that was signed
in Nairobi?
Yes, ahead of the
Then is it the Naivasha Accord?
The one where President Museveni is one of the guarantors.
Yes, that's the Naivasha Accord.
Yes, was never implemented. So when Afande Kraije talks about the stakeholders, I wish the stakeholders had concentrated on the implementation of the pact, because the purpose of this peace accord was to heal the wounds.
Yes.
Heal the wounds and prepare the country for takeoff. But it was never implemented, other than people taking power for vice presidents, doing what. There's nothing going on. We were worried as the Eastern Horn of Africa Election Observers Network about the state of elections. And in our scenario mapping, we had actually said there is need to postpone. But postpone to do what? So when you postpone without an action plan, then we shall have a 5th, 6th, and 7th postponement. The pact had created a timetable for registration of... the first issue was constitution. Negotiate new consensus as a country. That should have been part of the healing. As people talk, as people, peace and security, conflict, resettlement. That was the healing process. It never took off. After negotiating a new constitution and its promulgation, and maybe take it to a referendum as also part of the healing. Then come now and with a new legal framework, they were supposed to register political parties. Political parties are unregistered. The National Army, as I talked, is a party militia. It's a faction militia. How do you go for elections? They are all concentrating on safeguarding Riek Machar, Salva Kiir Bashir. They even wear party t-shirts. They don't have a national uniform. So what kind of country? The pillars of the state don't exist. They don't exist.
Dr. Sarah, they have a national uniform, but
They prefer.
the fact that
It's
putting
not
on
enforceable.
but the colors is notwithstanding, but they have a national uniform.
Okay. So if you have, because I don't imagine the national army in Patekaras.
Yellow.
So if they can't enforce simple discipline, the army is governed by
You know,
discipline.
you should have seen me here either in a red t-shirt with somebody's face or a yellow t-shirt.
The fact that there is no discipline in the army, then you have no army.
But you see, Sarah, I'm just giving information.
Yes.
Don't forget, Amin did it in 1969, the UPC National Conference. Amin, as army commander, led the whole company of 150 soldiers, putting on Obote's portraits.
It's no wonder that you overthrew it.
And no wonder he overthrew him a year and a half later. I mean, there are certain signs. These days you call them red flags.
Yeah.
There are red flags you will see. But like what I'm saying, it's like when you're building a house, the foundation matters. How deep is your foundation? You have a country that has never been a country before. And when it was sort of a country, 56, they are given independence by the British. Conflict starts. 56. I was not even born. Then the people of South Sudan take up arms in the 70s. Anyanya 1, Anyanya 2. SPLA comes up 1983. Actually, the first person to rebel against the Arabs is Salva Kiir. He was a battalion commander in the south. And Kanugarang was sent to actually arrest him. And instead he joined him. Yes.
That's interesting.
You see, if you have to understand any situation, you must know its history.
Yeah, that's very true.
Otherwise, and that's why people here who don't want us to know these things don't want us to talk about history. Unless you know where you have come from, you can't understand where you are, and you won't tell where you're going. So it's important to know that for a country that has never been one, that a society has never benefited from even the formal education, unrealistic as it is elsewhere, but these people were never exposed to education. To expect them to get back together only after 2011, we are simply expecting too much.
On that note, let's go for a break, and then we'll be back and pick it up from there. This is VPN. Just stay with us. Welcome back. Welcome back from the break. You're still tuned to VPN here on 933 KFM. We are still talking about the issues of security, national and state. And my guests, once again, I have Brigadier General Felix Kulaije, the Director, Defense Public Information, Dr. Sarah Birete, Executive Director, Center for Constitutional Governance and Chairperson, Eastern Horn of Africa Election Observers Network. And last but not least, I also have Dr. Livingstone Sewanyana, Founding Executive Director at the Foundation for Human Rights Initiative. So before we went into the break, we were talking about you are still looking at South Sudan and all the dynamics that make it what it is.
If I may conclude, the fact that the UN staff are all held in one compound, more or less like a camp. I know that UN usually creates villages for their staff.
Are they being held?
But no, that's why they stay and for security reasons.
Well, you use the word held against their will.
No, but it shows that the state of security in South Sudan. If you have the highest civil servants, the
international civil servants,
living in one camp for security purposes, and these are not the usual UN quarters or UN village. That shows you that South Sudan is not yet stable.
But if that's correct, Dr. Sarah, Vivian.
Judith.
Judith brings back the question, how relevant is the UN therefore?
We have our outgoing rapporteur.
Help me. If the UN is cramped up in a camp.
I think the UN and perhaps broadly speaking, maybe multilateral actors.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what brought them here in the first instance?
Well,
and they can't drive to the field; they just fly.
Could you speak to that?
it's fluid. It's a fluid situation.
Yeah.
So you can only look at it in its own context.
Okay.
We used to have even UN base here in Entebbe flying to DRC. They couldn't actually stay in DRC.
Yeah.
They had to stay here.
Entebbe,
So
yeah.
it depends on the
it's
context.
similar
in which
actually to
you are.
Moniuk.
You see, now therefore, why I brought this about this, and I'm glad Dr. Sarizon has raised it. Isn't it high time, as African elite, sat down to examine the relevance of some of these international agencies in peace creation, peace building?
Yeah, but also to juxtapose that is what is IGAD doing? Because the relevant African entity on the situation of South Sudan is IGAD on conflict, and that's its mantle. What has it done?
Good question.
They just talk. That's all.
Who finances IGAD?
So,
But if I may conclude,
Please,
so whereas South Sudan has postponed the elections, and I know we have a meeting as the EHON starting on Monday in Khartoum. So our call is that we need to have clear timelines.
You're going to
postpone elections. No, in Juba. Sorry,
Hey, I was going to ask whether you have written your will.
No, just a mix-up. Sorry. Yes, not in Juba. So postpone elections to do what, and who is responsible? Because they can postpone as much as they want, but I think they owe it to their citizens to organize themselves as a leadership and offer citizens a stable country. So we like to emphasize on the timelines and responsible entities in this postponement.
Dr. Sawanyana, let me get back to you on elections not holding value anymore. And I posed the question earlier, what would then be the alternative?
Of course, whichever alternative you think about, you have to be context specific. No situation applies uniformly across the board. One, of course, we need to broaden. The spaces for people so that they can choose their own methods of work and how they actually are governed. If you go back to pre-colonial Africa, there used to be frameworks within which people gathered and chose how they led themselves. We had clan-led systems. We had kingdoms. So each of them organized themselves accordingly and chose how to lead themselves. But of course, we can't go back to the clan system. Can't go back to the clan system or kingdom per se. But we need systems that deliver. For example, if you go to Switzerland, let me go to Switzerland. If you go to Switzerland, every canton, call it a canton, actually takes responsibility for the development in that particular area. Even voting, there are elections which are canton specific. You are electing according to your specific interests. But at the end of the day, you also have a parliament and those whom you elect and go to the national parliament. If you go to the US, for example, you have a federal arrangement. So it all goes back to what you prefer and what works. Here in Buganda, I think we have been agitating for a form of governance, a federal form of governance. Other people are talking about proportional representation. So there are very many forms of governance which can actually be fashioned according to the context. But this system as it is today, this representative system where people are just electing all manner of people without necessarily taking heed of the value addition, is not delivering. And that's the challenge. So one has to examine how best we can organize. But of course, you can also say, because when we talk about elections, there are different forms of electoral processes. There is representative, you have participatory governance. There are very many models. Actually, in my book, which I wrote, I examine the different models of governance and how they apply to different contexts. The challenge, and I think General Graiji attributed to it, is that where you have a poverty-stricken society, which has no interest to protect, but it's about survival, telling them to vote actually that vote doesn't count at the end of the day. So we need to broaden not only the spaces, but we also need to empower people economically so that they have interests that they can defend. And when they defend those interests, they are able to choose accordingly. But people are imposing themselves on citizens under the guise of elections. Actually, what they are doing is to perpetuate their own interests under X, Y, and Z party. But at the bottom line is that what are you actually offering? For example, if you look at America now, we are looking at the Republicans vis-a-vis the Democrats. So there are certain specific interests which we know that apply to the Democratic Party and which apply to the Republicans. For example, the Republicans are very keen on guns. And the Democrats are saying more gun control.
Yes.
So you have a choice to make: continue having guns or have more gun control.
Then you have the Republicans. The Republicans are pro-life. The Democrats are supporting abortion.
So you have a choice to make. So and that's the bottom line. But now when you come home, not only here but also in Greater Africa, you ask yourself, what am I actually choosing? Is it an individual I'm choosing, or I am choosing a particular program that will move me from point A to point B? That is the untold story, and that is why I increasingly question the purpose and essence of elections on this continent.
Okay, thank you. Let me come back to you, General. We know the UPDF has done quite a tremendous work across borders. In Somalia, for example, we know how much sacrifices actually the UPDF makes, how much it has contributed to pacifying, but also the losses that we've also incurred, sadly. But it has happened because you went there to pacify the region. We've seen what the UPDF has done in countries like in the Central African Republic, in the DRC. Of course, challenges and allegations of, say, plunder and certain things notwithstanding. But I want us to move back home. The UPDF, the army generally celebrated beyond borders. But when we come home, we see, for example, when we're looking at our politics, accusations of intimidation, especially on the opposition side. I don't know if you would actually comment on that.
Well, the legendary story of a prophet not respected at home comes back to haunt us. But before I come to your question, allow me start from where Dr. Siwanyan has ended. The people you celebrate about democracy. I was smiling because it reminded me of a French philosopher in the 18th century when they were celebrating Britain being the democracy of Europe. And a philosopher called Montesquieu said, the English are only free at election. After that, they are nothing but slaves. And the same reigns to date. You're only free when you're casting your vote. After which?
That freedom is taken away from you.
The freedom is taken away from you. Whether you have elected a buffoon, you are to be represented by that buffoon until the next election. Two,
no right of recall.
There's freedom to elect a buffoon.
Yes.
Yeah, there's freedom to elect a buffoon. You are saying it's a list, but I won't celebrate that one.
Okay.
But the point I'm making, he reminded me when he said of the poor people. A friend of mine amused me during the NRM primaries. This person was working with a supporter to mobilize for votes. Come the primaries, he finds this individual in opponent's line.
Hey.
And he said, what has happened? He said, they gave me 2,000 shillings. So somebody's right is bought by 2,000 shillings. And that is a very big statement, in my humble view, on the relevance of elections in the third world. But come back, so it is against that background that you have an army where, by the way, if you talk to many of these political actors in private, they will tell you they would have wished us to support some of them in these campaigns. But the army is a property of the state. And our actions are dictated by the deploying authority. But the bottom line, Judith, Dr. Sewanyana, Dr. Sarah, you are only free to vote when there is stability. If there is no stability, it doesn't matter how much English you will speak, Dr. Sewanyana, doesn't know how much international clout Sarah commands, you will be on the run. And it's my responsibility as a national army to ensure that both of you, your right to vote, are respected and protected. It's my duty. So, yes, we have been accused. In some instances, isolated that I must say, those claims have been proven true. Isolated cases. But by and large, the UPDF is a reliable partner in the democratization of this country.
So, I mean, my experience, also from our observations, when we have elections, whether they're by-elections or general elections, there's always a question, of course, about the presence of the army. I do understand from the security point of view, you do have a role to play, but there are also reports of the army meddling unnecessarily in the election process and basically undermining the integrity of the process and the outcome.
Like again, I said, Judith, we are not perfect. Okay? And we are individuals. We are not angels from heaven. Individuals can get corrupted, so to speak, not by money necessarily, but interests. Because human beings naturally have interests. True. If someone is my brother, he's my tribesmate, or same religion, by the way, and he's contesting against Dr. Sarah, and Sarah is the other person. He's theirs. You know, the Amawe and
the politics of us versus
them. You know, somebody may get sucked in, and some have been sucked in, unfortunately. But by and large, I assure you, if the EPDF did not play the role we play, and by the way, before I even conclude that one, why do we come on the street? Some people have turned elections into a do or die. Instead of, going for elections because you want to serve your community, like you put it, it's about selfish interests, and so you are willing to even spend a leg, if not your head, because you want to get the seat. Okay? And as a result, some people say, if I can't have it, they won't have it. Now, to avoid that, you want to leave no stone unturned in ensuring stability. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Sarah, I want to come to you. I want to pick what General has said and what Dr. Sewanyana said. The issue of poverty and now the commercialization of politics and basically how that reduces an individual's vote. And he's of the thought that the election, I think a phrase is, the election itself is a problem. Do you think the problem is the election, or rather the people or the institutions that are actually supposed to ensure that the elections are held the right way, and the quality is guaranteed, the processes are actually clear, and so on?
Well, the issue of poverty and how it affects our elections can be discussed in 3 ways. There are elements of the people who lack civic education on the duty of leaders. And these sections of the population think that when they see leaders during campaigns and get $1,000 or $2,000 shillings, not dollars, they think that that's their harvest time. The quid pro quo relationships. You want my vote, what are you giving me in exchange? Some of these people lack civic education. They don't even know the duty of leaders. They don't know the role of elections. They don't even connect service delivery issues to leadership. There are sections of the population who have lost hope in democracy. And they are like, even when they know that 1,000 shillings is useless, they are like, after all, these people are going to eat because of the hopelessness. let him also take this and drink my warage. Even when they know it doesn't make sense. Then you have also the leadership who have nothing else to offer to the people but money. The empty leadership. I know that the President Museveni uses ideological bankruptcy, but they have nothing else to offer if you took away their wallets. So it is at these three levels that we have increasing commercialization of politics that have extremely made or rendered our elections useless. But we have other challenges in elections. The vote rigging, quantifying, and the president made the comment.
I actually wanted to talk about that.
Yes. So
1 million votes.
Yes.
So does that mean himself he doesn't actually have faith?
I'm coming to that. So we have rigging incidences because as an observer, we know what we document. We have rigging incidences in elections. Also, briefly on the role of the army. If the army was coming into our electoral space to simply guarantee security, there would be less complaints about the army. When we complain about the army, it's not that we don't like our national army or we disregard their role. I have emphasized the role of the army in Sudan and why it's problematic because they lack discipline. But in our context, the partisan tendencies in the army. I will give an example of Brigadier Sande and what he did in Massacre in elections. Brigadier Sande made cantankerous statements. It is scandalous to still see him in a citizen's uniform today. He even moved house to house, making cantankerous statements, threatening opposition. He's still serving in this army. There are very few elements that are extremely partisan, extremely unprofessional, and have put us as citizens at loggerheads with our army, which we love so much. But we will call them out because what they are doing is wrong. If they think they want to engage in partisan politics, let them put off a citizen's uniform. The UPDF uniform belongs to the people. It does not belong to anyone. Let them put it off and go and be free on the campaign trail. Those ones we shall continue to call them out.
Well, thank you. Let me come to you. I just wanted General to respond to what Sarah is saying.
It's good you are giving me a chance because I have to run out.
Yeah. I'm also aware about that. The partisan tendencies of the military, and how do you basically address these kinds of these dilemmas in the army? If you're having what's his name?
Brigadier Sande. I don't know whether it's still a brigadier or he was promoted.
I mean, how do you address this? What kind of disciplinary action, if any, are these individuals?
The passion and the anger Sarah uses on this one would even make me scared out of this room. But fortunately, I'm not easily scared. You would think he's going to pick that cup and bash me. But, it's true there are some of us who get unprofessional. And the mechanisms are there that we are called to order when we do it. We do not go to that extreme, say he should be put off uniform because what he did is not outrageous. Yes, it's wrong, but it's human error. Even in the US, there is a senior officer who said he would not salute Obama. Was it Obama or Clinton? One of the two. Yes, the guy was called to order, but he wasn't dismissed. The point I'm making is that if it can happen in such a mature democracy of 300 years, it can also happen here. The bottom line, what is the general character of the EPDF? And I can tell you, like I said, it's an ally, and we are not from heaven or Mars. But two, the context we are operating in, the politicians that are on the stage, what character are they? Because I have a case where a politician paid a hooligan to slap a police officer so that he's arrested. Because in his own words, he was telling me, said, Nagendo, I saw in Uganda, I was not going to make news. They had allowed them to march. You mean I'm ending the day without making news? So he gave some little money to a fellow, said, slap that policeman. And he disrupt him. What happened next was tear gas. And he made the headlines and the news he wanted. Now, if you have that caliber of politicians, are you surprised that you may have people in uniform who also go against the norm and the required professional ethics.
But the challenge is, what do you do as UPDF?
I have told
to
you.
bring them to order?
We do.
What did you do to Brigadier Santa?
You wanted us to bring it out in the open?
No, because what he did was real in the open.
No, Sarah, even if what he did was in the open. If you commit murder in the open, we shall punish you in the open. But a professional area, we call you to order and we punish you. And there are several punishments that are before the leadership of the institution. We won't come in the public, bring a general and parade him. That's also undermining the integrity of the institution.
Yeah, you don't have to parade him, but you can communicate to citizens that this was done.
We did.
Because we might see him again doing the same.
We did call the general to order. You can be sure.
I think Sarah's concern is that many times when we see men in uniform, and I'm also talking about the police, when they do wrong, but it is pro-establishment, when they say intimidate people, but they're doing it because they're trying to protect, say, someone in the establishment.
Allow me not to help you not be labor. When I do a wrong thing, I'm not helping the establishment. I'm actually weakening the image of the establishment.
But most times we the interpretation or the impression we get as citizens is that they are rewarded instead for actually doing that.
No. You see, when the head is mad, the hand will throw a stone. Not so. So when I misbehave, it mirrors wrongly or badly on my commander-in-chief. And so it pays better if I do I handle the situation professionally. And I want to tell you this also. Just like vehicles are different, I've seen Dr. Swanya driving a Mercedes-Benz. I hope I'm right.
I've never even owned one. However old it is.
The point I'm making is that the shock absorbers of Mercedes-Benz are not the same as shock absorbers of a Toyota Corona. Some of us have the values of Mercedes-Benz. You can withstand the pressure. Like I was beaten and I drove away. Another one won't. Another officer actually, that very day, got out his AK and fired and they ran away. I didn't. So the reactions we do in certain circumstances may go back to our natural instincts besides the professional training or etiquette. And when those happen, it does not call for uniform condemnation.
Maybe one aspect that we need to bring out, maybe Brigadier may want to take it, Brigadier General, need to take note of is that we are experiencing increasing incidents of misconduct of military officers, and there have been quite a number. So the question is, how can we avert that? In the past, we used not to have those sort of so many incidents, but now you hear this one has shot a police officer, this one abused the police, abused X. So we have quite a growing trend of misconduct.
And just to add, as we're heading into elections, I think people also have this fear that we could be seeing more of that.
Can I also ask you, aren't you noticing increasing crimes being committed by civilians?
That is also
our Sergeant Cheptegei was killed by her boyfriend. She's not even a soldier. She's a soldier. She's the one who was killed. The increasing criminality you are seeing is a product of a rotting society. Rotting because values have been relegated to the table, at the table of search for profits. Homes that built you and I are no longer doing their job. And when it comes to our class, the middle class and the upper class, it's even worse. Go to rehabilitation centers, you find who are the majority. They are children from the elite, the children of well-to-do. That's where the problem lies. So the people you are giving us are not the best of the best that we took at our time.
But you could also argue that it could be a growing culture of impunity that we are witnessing.
But it comes from, that's what I told you, the beginning of character formation is at home. It's not in the military or the police.
Yeah, but now that you know that society is actually producing you people who are flawed, what are you doing as an institution to actually help and make sure they stay true to the values of this institution?
You give me a young man or a young woman who is 22, 25 years. The first years of character building have been wasted, if I may use that word, because mother and father were not there for this child. the character he or she is should have been, will not be known by any. And yet you expect the LC1 to be the one to recommending this individual who has grown up inside the wall. Does the LC1 know this individual? No. But that's the letter we receive. So the LC1 is the starting problem on the second level. First level is the family, second level LC1. He or she is recommending a person they don't know. And yet they are the ones we are relying on for recommendation. So when you give them to us, because you know very well they are coming to protect you, we accept them. Now you expect us to change them in 9 months when they have been unattended to for 22, 25 years. You're expecting a miracle.
I don't know if any of you wants to actually respond to that.
No. What I would say is that as citizens, we expect more from the army. And we deserve more. And we want to see an army that has capacity to get rid of characters that have failed to fit in the values of the institution. Get rid of them.
General. Thank you very much. Well, Brigadier General has stepped out for something else, but the conversation continues.
Yeah, but when we speak about culture of impunity, much as the General kept talking about our bringing, I think here you are looking at institutional discipline, that it seems to be increasingly eroded. And there is also that sense of entitlement. I was in the bank yesterday, and I'm sorry to say, some gentleman came in and was abusing the bank staff. We were all seated there, and he kept on making all sorts of utterances that, you know, he wanted to show he has money. The money I invest here, why would I spend so much time here? You are not doing your job. You see my lawyer. And of course you could know, and looking at him, who he is. So the idea of entitlement, there is this element of entitlement.
And arrivalism.
I call it arrivalism, which has crept in so many institutions. And by virtue of that, they act in such a way as if there is no authority that overrides them. It is that which is causing the level of indiscipline and impunity we are talking about. So many of these institutions have now to grapple with this challenge. We shouldn't look at it as if everybody is behaving that way, but those who seem to have arrived feel there is a sense of entitlement, and it is that sometimes pushes them to behave the way they do.
Thank you. Let's take a break, and then we come back and continue from the issue of entitlement and generally how people are raised and how it's actually causing us all these problems that we have in the military and other institutions. Welcome back. Welcome back from the break. This is still a VPN, and our other guest, Brigadier General Felix Kulaiji, has stepped out already. He's gone for other engagements. So I'm still here with Dr. Sarah Bereti and Dr. Livingstone Sewanyana. Of course, the conversation continues about the national and state security. So before we took the break, and before Brigadier General left, he was talking about, you know, the character and how society is producing all these flawed individuals, and why it actually ends up in the institutions being blamed for the misdemeanors or bad choices made by individuals. And you were talking about entitlement, which actually reminded me about some time back. I think I was reading somewhere, either in the papers, during the recruitment actually of when people are being drafted into the army, and there are all these people who come with lists and say, these are my people, so please make sure you recruit them, and everyone seems to have a cohort of individuals that are being brought, and you must actually just find a way of making them accepted or admitted in the military. And I think there was someone in the army who was actually making a comment and saying, now, when you have these kinds of people coming in, how are you supposed to hold them accountable? Or because they are also fronted by individuals who are also powerful and highly connected and big. And definitely this poses challenges, because if someone knows I have a godfather somewhere who brought me here, then who are you, Mr. Sewanyana, to hold me accountable. After all, the person who sent me here is bigger than you. So I think those are also certain challenges that perhaps are not so well talked about, but behind the scenes you do hear that these things happen a lot. Even when you hear people joining the prisons or the police, these issues keep coming up time and again. But I think, Sarah, let's move to now the postponement of the South Sudan elections to 2026. I know you were actually very prepared as observers to go and observe the elections. But what do you actually make of this? I was reading in a WhatsApp group that has some friends of mine from South Sudan, and they were saying, South Sudan is a situation where agreements are no longer useful. And I thought that is actually something that stood out for me from one of the comments that this person made. To what extent do you think actually agreements or elections can move South Sudan?
Well, first of all, the meeting we are going to tomorrow, because we are traveling tomorrow, was to get a civil society position on the elections. Because we did the scenario mapping exercise, and the most possible scenario was actually
postponement.
Yes. Because there was no legal framework for elections, no registration of parties, and no funding for elections. So what elections are you talking about? And this is 3 months to the D-Day. No budget, no legal framework, no registration of actors, nothing. So we're like, what kind of exercise are we going into? So it was the most possible scenario. But our interest would be timelines for the postponement. Because this is the 4th or 5th postponement of elections. But they postpone and do nothing. And the next timeline of 2026, we'll find them when still there is no funding, there is no legal framework, there is no mechanism at all for elections. So our interest now would be to work on a mechanism and advocate for it throughout the 2 years to make sure that finally South Sudan can maybe have a new consensus as to who should govern them. Then let's start working for the post-conflict South Sudan. That would be our interest and maybe contribution as civic actors. But when you look generally at the state of South Sudan, I hope, because when you look at and I was even following the interview of Rebecca Garang as the first vice president, there is no state to talk about. Sometimes you don't even know who is in charge. There's almost like nobody in charge. You can imagine a president with 4 vice presidents. And these vice presidents are factions of the several political interests. And everybody comes with their baggage, including now the political actors who are in the army. Because they were fighting, they were rebels as politicians. They are now generals. Like wearing party colors. How do we reintegrate them back to the political parties? They need to leave the army. So these are all the conversations that should be done ahead of elections.
Yeah, but I think speaking about South Sudan, you are dealing with a very fragile state. And if you go back to history, where there are fragile states, it's the military that actually dominates. Until institutions are built and there is a possibility of civility emerging. South Sudan, which you're talking about, is not different from Uganda. You go back to our history. You remember those short-term governments after Idi Amin kept on falling one after another.
The longest was actually Idi Amin.
Yes.
Until Museveni came.
So there was Aminism all through up to the end, until you have the so-called NRM revolution. And when that happens, I think the first thing that was done was to try to build institutions, including what she said, a constitution, having a constitution in place. So in a situation where they are just rival factions, and of course deep-seated interests, it's difficult to have a meaningful election. So much as we could still say yes, 2 years, and then another 2 years, the point is Sudan as it is, South Sudan as it is today, is not ready for that type of governance. What they need is to build institutions. So still the challenge now is upon the different players. Because now it's between Riek Machar and the Salva Kiir, who are apparently the two protagonists are warmongers, I should say. So, and they are, and all those who follow them. So, that is when sometimes you see agencies like UN come in, African Union come in, IGAD has to come in and try to create an environment where institutions can be built, frameworks can be put in place. But a discussion on elections in South Sudan is really futile. It's an exercise in futility.
Do you agree that it is an exercise in futility, or do you think actually it's a culture that, don't you think this is a culture that should actually be allowed to take root and grow, the mistakes and challenges notwithstanding, with time, years, decades from now, don't you think things can actually get better?
No, Dr. Livingstone mentions the issue of building institutions. It's very important. Yeah. But my question, even as he was talking, I whispered, who will
build?
Yes, who will build them? So the transitional leadership of South Sudan, from the peace agreement to independence to wherever, has failed to build these institutions. Because they've been there now 13 years. There is no institution to talk of.
So, but okay, I just want.
So, who is going to build them? I'm coming.
What are they doing in this 13-year period? When you sit down as observers, when you send reports and so on, what are they doing?
All our reports from our membership in South Sudan shows it's a failed. You can't say failed state because it's a young country, the youngest. It's a baby that is failing to crawl. It's a baby that can't move, 13 years, is seated. That is South Sudan. So when you say that you give this same leadership, which has failed to make one step for 13 years, would you be expecting anything? So the solution then comes if you make simple tasks. Maybe if they can make a constitution. The UN has been trying. Terrible training, constitutionalism, women, youth, but the political leadership has failed to move. If we can have consensus to say all actors, let's concentrate on three things. Make a legal framework, the constitution. Fund like 5 institutions to function. The justice, law and order sector, get the army order and rehabilitate, reintegrate to those who need to go back to political parties. They move out because the politician had joined the army because it was the only option. Can they be given a chance now to demobilize, disarm and demobilize and go back and build parties? Because even those who want to build parties, there is no framework for them to build parties. So this is what needs to be done in the immediate. Once this is in place, then you can hold the elections. But for me, I'm worried about the leadership that has failed to crawl for 13 years.
Yeah, but the challenge is that you need a political leadership that has the will for that to happen.
That's why we must have elections.
But you see, at the end of the day, it still remains a struggle between the two. Riek Machar, they all want to advance their interests. They only want to lead. They are not interested in nation building. And that's the challenge with many African leaders, that at the end of the day, it's not about the country. It is about them and their cronies and those who, and their surrogates, those who follow them. At the end of the day, it's not the people. The suffering of the people is an opportunity for them to extend their influence and power. So again, it requires other stakeholders. That's why sometimes these other institutions come in, like UN, African Union, IGAD, and others, who now have to force them somehow or encourage them to come to a round table and agree on some minimal agenda. And that minimal agenda is the one that will then drive the country to a different level. But given the current political leadership, oh my God, it becomes, a dream come true.
So even if we say they will hold elections in 2026 December, would you expect new faces or new voices that could actually or new issues that can actually shape the South Sudan elections?
Well, you see, when the two protagonists are eligible to contest, and even personally not willing to step aside, you can't stop them. But I hope that there will be other new forces that can contest with them. They won't be the only ones. If there was a framework for a semblance of an election to take place, I'm sure new people will emerge. It would be, the ideal situation would be for these two leaders to preside over the transition and stop. That's when Sudan can have a chance at growing as a nation. But so long as they are still interested in dominating the political scene and even failing these simple processes from taking place, then they are doing a disservice to everybody, the South Sudanese people and the international community. And they need to be told so.
Okay. Would you like to comment, or can I ask the next question? I want us to come back home again, still on the issue of our military and involvement in elections. As we're heading to 2026, of course, there are fears and concerns. Actually, Stephen just shared with me that on social media now, people have been sharing videos of people in army uniform engaged in election malpractice in the past, and linking it to
including critiquing ballots and kidnapping people.
And by all accounts, of course, people are saying, okay, after what the upset NUP caused in Central Region in the last election, people don't know what to expect, how fierce and hotly contested is 2026 going to be, and what would we like to see from our army and our men and women in uniform generally? Let me start with you.
Speaking about security and security engagement in elections, I think the minimum that we expect is that they'll act professionally. That, yes, they'll continue to guarantee security for all, but they will not meddle in the process, that they will not be openly biased, and that they will not in any way interfere with the process. One of the biggest challenges we have had with the elections in Uganda is that even when the Electoral Commission issues guidelines that need to be adhered to by all stakeholders, and here I'm talking about those who campaign or those who offer themselves for political competition, those their sympathizers, and all the different, even the security agents, there is very minimal adherence to those guidelines, and also allowing the Electoral Commission to take charge of the process. If, as we move towards 2026, the institutions we are talking about allow the Electoral Commission to take charge and act professionally and adhere to the guidelines, then you definitely should see a different outcome. But short of that, it remains a difficult ball game, more especially when there is bias, when there's political bias from those who are supposed to ensure a fair and competitive process.
Thank you. Sarah, let's hear from you.
Well, the army, I hope some of them have learned their lessons through, the visa restrictions, because most of them cannot travel beyond Africa because of their personal crimes, disrupting democracy. I hope those have learned a lesson. The army has continued to degenerate. Every election they hit the new law in terms of partisan and unprofessional conduct. The 2021 elections degenerated into kidnaps, extrajudicial killings. We still have a lot of political activists stuck in the court martial. So when the nature and character of the army, and the army needs to know that once they lose the goodwill of the people, the civil-military relations in this country will collapse. And once they collapse, they cannot be an army with the people's support, without the people's support.
Okay, then. Thank you very much. I think let's just wrap it. We'll keep it at that. Stephen is telling me it's already time for us to go, and I see Kathy is already getting set for the news. Thank you very much, Dr. Sarah Birete, Dr. Livingstone Sewanyan, and Brigadier General Felix Kuleje, who has already left us. We've been talking about national and state security. Of course, we've looked at issues in South Sudan, how things are evolving there, and the accusations, of course, from the other side that the UPDF is actually encroaching on territory, which the army tells us that's not the case. They are simply there to protect the territory on the border on the Ugandan side. Thank you very much to my guests, and thank you to all of you for tuning in. Our apologies, we're having some technical issues and we could not pick calls. But we do hope to have this rectified, and next Saturday we shall be actually hearing from you. But for keeping it with us here, I want to say thank you very much. VPN returns next Saturday. I'm Judith Atim. Have yourself